So today you'll hear more about the work that Kingston team are doing on automating their triage process in adult social care. We're expecting quite a few of you today, so we won't have time to do introductions for everyone, but we would absolutely love to hear who's in the virtual room. So please do introduce yourselves in the chat when you have the chance to do so. In terms of the logistics, so I will be handing over to the Kingston team very shortly. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions at the end to have a sort of more interactive Q&A type of session. But if you do have questions that arise during the presentation, please do put these in the chat and the team will try their best to answer them there and then. If the usual thing of if you are not speaking or presenting, please do place yourselves on mute. So let's dive straight into this. I think I just wanted to say that, you know, we are absolutely delighted to share the great work that Kingston are doing and other boroughs are doing in the social care space. Lottie itself has an interest in social care, and we've got 2 pilots that we are running at the moment in testing the potential of new service models in improving outcomes for people receiving social care services. And I just want to tell you that if you are interested in those 2 projects and in other work that's happening from other boroughs in this space, please join us every Wednesday for the next 3 Wednesdays, because we'll be having a show and tell at 10 a.m. every Wednesday for the next couple of weeks. If you are interested but you do not know where to sign up, again, please contact me. I will put my email in the chat in a couple of minutes. But for now, I will hand over to the Kingston team to present. Thank you. Over to you, Pritesh.
Thanks, Ginta. Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Pritesh. I'm the product manager leading the work on adult social care triage automation discovery at Kingston. We've got quite a packed agenda. So we'll give a quick intro and provide context on what the discovery is about. We'll then, Sue will be speaking around what we've learned so far within the discovery. I'll then talk around the processes that other partner councils have got for their adult social care process. And then Sue will be talking around the decision factors or the factors that influence the decision making. And we have Rupam, our technical architect, who's going to be talking around the possible solutions, and then I'll go through the next steps and for our discovery. And then we'll have a section at the end for any questions that you might have. So just a quick introduction. So you know me already. We've got a small team. We have Sue, who's our user researcher. We have Zoe, who's our service designer, and we have Rupam, who's our technical architect. You'll meet all of these people during the course of this presentation. So just to give a bit of context into our discovery. So the problem that we have, or that adult social care is facing, is the growing demand within adult social care. So the NHS have some stats on their adult social care dashboard, which identifies that there's a growing demand of new cases coming in with an increase of 2 to 5% from 2017. Within Kingston, we are well above that. So they're seeing an increase of 14%. And so this discovery is to understand, as digital, how can we try and alleviate some of this demand on the adult social care space? What digital processes can we have in place? We know already that there's no automation throughout the process within adult social care. So therefore, is there anything that we can try and help within the space and try and automate within that process? So therefore, this discovery is going to be looking at the adult social care process within Kingston and other partner councils. We're also looking at the data. What is the data telling us? And is there any aspects within the data that we can try and automate, and what technologies are being used within adult social care as well, and what technologies are out in the markets at the moment that can help us try and automate the process better. So the project itself isn't Kingston Council funded, it's actually DLUC funded. So we're doing this in partnership with 6 other councils. So these councils include West Berkshire, Greenwich, Dorset, Southwark, and Redbridge and Merton. So the diagram just below shows a possible 2B process where a number of councils are bidded for to provide a discovery for each of these processes. We at Kingston are bidding for the automate triage, the big red box that's highlighted, which includes conducting assessments and planning and making decisions. So this forms the scope of this particular discovery. So that provides a bit of context. I'll now hand over to Sue, who will be explaining what we've learned throughout this discovery.
Hi everybody, morning. So I'm the user researcher on the team, bringing the human angle to how people triage and assess and make care prescriptions. We've done a lot of work with the partner councils, obviously a lot of work with our own council, shadowing teams for a day, following cases through. We spent a day, if you could change the slide, please, Pritesh. We spent a day at Merton, we spent a day with West Berkshire, so thank you very much if any of you guys are on the call for your collaboration. And we've had sort of remote digital walkthroughs of processes with the teams from Dorset and Southwark as well. So we built up a really great picture of how things are working across all the different partner councils. Next slide, please. And we've got some common patterns come out, definitely, some real key areas. So, you know, we've learned that conversation is key. You know, we are looking at automation and digitization, but you're never going to take the human angle completely out of this. You know, human conversation is important. People are trying to assess, you know, the full extent of the story. Are people telling me really the truth? Are they underestimating their needs? You know, there's definitely a human angle there. Financial assessments do not keep up with the care assessment process, and this was a key issue that we found in every council that we've spoken to. People's needs are complex. When you're triaging and providing care prescriptions, there's a lot to consider. Nobody ever comes along with just one problem. This is a complex case scenario. There's a complexity between different council systems and systems not talking to each other. So a lot of people with adult social care needs also have housing needs. They may also have mental health needs. What we found is that the systems are not visible to teams. Communication between those teams is difficult and problematic. We want to open up visibility so that we're offering a more holistic service. And that's definitely an area that digital can help with. Big problem with Merlin's, with the Metropolitan Police System, but also we found this in Dorset, the problem with rules. This is a much bigger, wider issue caused by lack of mental health services. But we think digital can do something in this space to capture the data more efficiently, process them more efficiently. We've really learned that everyone in the social care team is needing to act like a detective. Part of that is just naturally part of the role, but actually we're making it quite difficult for them at the moment because they're having to look in so many different places for the information, and they're the person who has to sort of join it all up. Lots and lots of manual processes. As Pritesh referred to, there's really not a lot of digitization in this space, systems not talking to each other, having to copy and paste information from one form into another, nothing translating through automatically. And we found that people are essentially wasting time on a lot of sort of questions that they have to answer over and over again. And this is connected with the lack of visibility between systems. So, you know, ASC teams having to take calls from housing, having to make calls to housing because they can't see, there's no visibility. So they're having to actually ask those questions. Is this person known to you? Are you working with them already? We need to join up that thinking. Next slide, please. One of the other things that surprised us, so we found a consistent pattern of of the setup within Teams. You've got a front door kind of offering where people are doing the first immediate triage. That's called by different names, but essentially it's a front door. You've got a kind of hospital team that's handling hospital discharge, and you've got a long-term team. And one of the things that really came out was how difficult it can be to move cases on from that front door environment, because the idea is that they're supposed to be there anywhere between 48 hours to 6 weeks. But because of the nature of people's problems, because of the resistance sometimes to engaging with the care, to not wanting it, they can't move the case on. And this is a problem because it's causing a backlog and taking up people's time in what should be a kind of quick response environment. Next slide, please. So this is just to show you a couple of the assets that we've created. I'm not going to go through them in detail here, but when you see the slides, you'll be able to have a look at them. And we would welcome any feedback and comments on them. We've obviously done all the normal user research assets of empathy maps for the team. We're also working on a big set of user needs, which are not ready to share yet, but they will be available at the end of this project for anyone who's interested. Next slide, please. There you go. That's the social worker version. And again, please. I'm going to hand you over now to Zoe, who's our service designer, who's done a lovely little walkthrough for you of kind of the process of the triage and assessment process from the staff members' point of view. And she's going to walk you through that process, identifying some of the areas of pain that we've discovered. So Zoe, over to you.
Great, thank you, Sue. So like here, like is the word of the social services. We have like these 3 key characters, as you can see. Yara is a dedicated support coordinator. She's like excels at like capturing the comprehensive user profiles, guiding the users to the right resources and providing them the valuable support. And Raj is an experienced team leader. So like he plays a really pivotal role in evaluating and assigning the user cases to the right team member. And then Lisa, a really skillful social worker. She's like a problem solver who listens attentively and always keeps the best interest of her clients at heart. So next slide, please. Yara, the support coordinator, she faces a daily challenge. Each of the cases demands significant time to hunt the service user's information. The reason? Due to the insufficient data, exactly like Sue mentioned before, because the lack of invisibility among different care agency systems, as well as the NHS. But Yara, she's like not one to back down. So apart from like hunting for all sorts of information, she's always on the call to check if the service user meets the eligibility criteria under the Care Act. She also like having like a trusty notebook by the hand to take the note while she was on the call, and also a series of the open tabs on her computer screen. She guides the user towards the right resources in this way. Next slide, please. So here enter Raj, the team manager. So before assigning any cases to his team, Raj would double check if this case is aligned with his team's scope, capability, and if there's enough information existing in the system. So afterwards, he would then decide the right course of action and assign the case to the most suitable team member. So to complete the assignment, Raj would having to like manually to enter the key dates, abbreviations for the care packages, and also the next action points in the user cases every single time. So after like the whole process, like Raj would like hand over to Lisa. So now the user case reaches Lisa's capable hands. So a skilled investigator. Lisa, she kind of gathers insights from the different systems, forming the hypothesis about the user cases before the assessment. So next slide, please. Prakash, can we go to the next slide? Great, thank you. So like Lisa, she also doesn't stop at the desk. She would also like scheduling the home visit to like build the trust with the clients, although sometimes users can be like super challenging to communicate with, and they may sometimes provide false information about their current living situation, or maybe fail to mention certain conditions in their online documentation. But Lisa, she like really like persist and remain committed to help all of the users. So next slide, please. Here is like the last bit of our story. So after the home visit, what Lisa gonna do, she's gonna return back to her work computer. She would translating the handwritten notes into the coherent full care needs assessment records in the system. So she would also trying to summarize the user cases, seeking the approval from her team manager, Raj, for the care plan. So as a liaison, Lisa would also connect the service users, their relatives, professionals, care agents, and internal team, like the finance team and the brokerage team. So she has her hands full trying to just keep everyone in the loop. So next slide, please. So in the words of the social services, Yara, Raj, and Lisa are the unnamed heroes. They navigate to complex systems, each of them contributing their unique skills to support those in need. So all of this story is based on our extensive user research and the shadowing session with the social workers. Now I'm gonna hand over to Pritesh, who will provide deeper insights into our processes.
Thanks, Zoe. Okay, so we've had a number of documents when working with our partner councils. So we delved into what those processes are and how different they are between each other. So as you can see here, these are some of the artifacts that we've received from our partner councils, and some partner councils, as you can imagine, don't have any digital capabilities, in which case we had to go in there and have a look at what their process is and have sessions with them to try and devise what those processes actually look like. So with that, we did a whole load of analysis, looked at what similarities there were, what differences there were, are there any challenges, pain points with any of these processes. This basically helps us get a consensus of, what does the workflow within adult social care look like, and how, if anything, how can this try be automated within that process? So what the processes that you're about to see are basically really simplified versions of the actual processes. They, just so that for ease of understanding, we've identified any similarities where possible and reduced any information just to not overload yourselves. There are not all the teams are included, so we have business support and third-party care services. They're not included within any of these processes, just to try and simplify the process as much as possible. So this is a process that is within RVK. There is a hospital discharge team, so every council that we spoke to, they generally have the same kind of team. So everybody has a hospital discharge team, everybody has a contact team which receives the initial contact of the case. The contact team will triage those cases to a short-term team. At Kingston, they call that the access team. Both the access team and the hospital discharge team will provide as much care as they can to provide that immediate care to either the patient or to the user. When that case is ready and a care plan is being provided, it will then get handed over to the locality hubs, which is a team that deals with longer term care for complex needs. Both the short-term care team and long-term care teams will interact with a finance team. This finance team will work out what the user is eligible for in terms of funding, or what proportion of funding is eligible to them, and how much contribution that user will have to make. And also the social workers will also be working with the brokerage teams. So once they create a care plan, the brokerage team will be responsible for finding the right people to provide that care. So this is an example of what the Greenwich process looks like. The main differences here is that they have a lot more teams. So within the short-term care team, they have certain specialists that deal with the initial assessments, providing signposting. As you can see, 70% of all their contacts that they receive are just signposting, so lead-in users. So they have a dedicated team that just deals with that. And they have immediate intervention team as well. With their long-term teams, they have, again, specialists within those teams, which deal with community rehabilitations and short-term assessments, complex care, and nil resource to public funds team. And this is Dorset's. So Dorset have actually chosen to split up their access team. So they have a central access team, which deals with all of the signposting and all those cases up front. And this reduces the number of cases they get by 25% before it actually goes into the access team to deal with the actual cases itself and provide that immediate care. Similar to Kingston, they have localities teams split up by geographical region. And this is Southwark. The main difference is Southwark is that they have actual specialists within the contact centre itself. So right at the front door, they have specialists to deal with the cases. So they have 3 OTs, 3 social workers, each overseeing the actual team itself. This ensures that they collect the right information up front and also be able to triage the cases to the correct places. And this is West Berkshire. So unlike all the other councils, West Berkshire has taken a 3 conversation model approach, where you have the same locality team dealing with each stage within the process. So from the initial conversation stage, where we try and understand the case situation and being able to provide that signposting up front, to the care planning and providing the longer term care. So it's more of an end-to-end approach that they're taking with providing care. So here's a summary of all the similarities and differences. They fundamentally, in terms of the process, they all have the initial contact stage, short-term teams are present, as well as the longer-term teams, and they all have interactions between the finance team and the brokerage teams. All councils have contact centres to triage those cases, and all councils have case management systems in place. 2 use Liquid Logic, 4 use Mosaic, and 1 use Care Director. All the councils have hospital discharge teams, which are responsible for providing that care when a patient is discharged from the hospital. And all councils have challenges with their financial assessments. So the main challenge around financial assessments is that getting the financial assessment done in time so that care can be provided to the user. And also, all councils struggled with the visibility of different service databases and systems. So all at various stages, so the cases end up being triaged into different places. So adult social care will have cases that could be responsible for housing and or mental health. Those cases should have got triaged correctly up front. In terms of differences, as I've discussed, West Berkshire operates on the free conversation model. Some councils have a long-term team set up. Other councils have longer-term teams set up with split by geographical region or by the skill set of that particular social worker. Southwark and Merton have trained specialists for the initial contact phases to ensure that those cases are triaged correctly. Greenwich takes the approach of teams being able to administer short-term and long-term care. And this is based on their qualifications of their specialists. And also different systems are used by finance and brokerage teams. So what are the pain points? Lack of time has been identified as a major pain point. A lot of social workers have spent a lot of time providing signposting, dealing with simple cases, investing time in dealing with duplicate records, preparing for panel assessments. Incorrect triaging, so a lot of the leads within the teams are dealing with cases that shouldn't really have been assigned to them, but assigned to different teams. Social workers have been dealing with manual processes in place, there's no real forms of email automation or email reminders, so they have to provide this, do these emails from scratch, and they have to search for multiple users within the case management system and do a lot of copy and pasting as well. Data and forms are not updated, so there's a lack of data consistency within the systems, and so a lot of the forms and options that they see in the systems end up to be out of date. So it derives a number of key goals from looking at these pain points. So we'd like to improve the triaging by allowing all leads to look at the cases within the teams. We want to allow social workers more time to provide care to those users and to have more time for care planning, and also be able to reduce the manual overhead that they have to deal with. Okay, so that's the process. We're going to deep dive into one part of that process, which is the triaging process and the factors that are influencing the decision making. And I'll hand over to Sue.
Thanks, Pritesh. If you could just change the screen, please. So the decision making is obviously really important in this scenario, and what we're trying to look at is obviously we're learning a lot from the data about the types of cases come in, the types of problems people have and the outcomes that might result from that. But there is a human angle to this about how people make decisions, and how could a digital support tool help people to make those decisions. And that particularly feels quite relevant at the moment, whereas where a number of the councils we've spoken to are having to resort to agency staff quite a lot, and maybe they don't have the knowledge base that, you know, long-term staff would have. So we've been trying to get inside people's heads to think about, when you're making these decisions, what are the factors that are influencing the decisions you're making. So next screen, please. So we've come up with these slightly crazy looking maps. There is a bizarrely unintuitive anti-clockwise process flow to this, roughly. It doesn't mean those questions always come in that order, but that's the rough kind of process. But we're trying to think about the point of triage, initial triage. What are the decision factors? You know, the first thing being like, you know, does this person live in my borough? Are they my responsibility? And actually we found that sometimes, you know, our staff are having to go and use external resources and do a postcode search to discover whether somebody is in borough. And that would be so easy to embed in our system instead of having to go elsewhere to find it. And, you know, being able to have insight of somebody's medical records, so you can tell where, you know, should a CHC funding be a possibility here. You know, those kind of things that people are working through in their head to answer the questions in order to get to a point where they think, okay, I understand where I'm going to sort of direct this person's care. And next screen, please. And we've done the same thing, trying to think about the process of actually making an assessment. So when a social care worker comes to the point where they know they're going to go out and make an assessment, what are the decision factors? What are the questions they're trying to answer in order to put that assessment in place? And one of those is obviously priority, urgency. You know, have they got the next of kin details? You know, do they know who to talk to? One of the things that came out quite strongly was, you know, is there a power of attorney in place, so I know who I should be speaking to? And so if you could change to the next slide, please. So this is just a really simple demonstration of why we're trying to do this, because if we know what the questions are, so this one is the example of the power of attorney, how can we support somebody in answering that question so they can quickly move on to the next step in the process? So there's a kind of simple way to do that, which is the system will support them with a sort of yes, no response and give them a kind of next step and say, right, well, this is, you're going to ask for proof, or you know, you're going to offer advice, and this is where you will find the advice, and this is a templated letter to do that. Or there's a slightly more technical option whereby we are able to automatically connect with the gov.uk checking service, and we will just be able to know whether somebody has a power of attorney in place. So there's two ways that we could look to answer that question, and that's something that we would then explore. So that's the reason that we've been sort of mapping out those decisions, and what we're going to do is produce those sort of decision trees based on that to see how a tool would need to support somebody in the process. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to hand back to Pritesh, who's going to look at how we use that to make some possible solutions.
Cool, thanks, Sue. Okay, so we've got the pain points that were discussed earlier and some of the decisions. How can we employ, what solutions are out there to actually address some of these pain points? But before we go into the possible solutions, we also need to have some consideration of what constraints are there within adult social care. So a lot of the councils have already invested quite a lot of time and effort and also money to their case management tools. So any solution that we actually come up with, it needs to be in conjunction with those case management tools that are currently in place. Processes are also well established within those councils. Changing too much within that process will have a great impact onto those social workers that are being able to provide that care to that particular user, and which will have a detrimental effect for that for the end user as well. Social workers are not tech savvy, so anything that we do come up with, it needs to be simple and for anybody to use. And any solutions, suggestions that we come out of this discovery needs to work with all the partner councils, not just for Kingston. So we're definitely taking into consideration all those constraints. So these are just some of the possible solutions. So I'll go through these and not go into specific details around these, but just as a high level. So we have notification service providers. So these notification service providers provide email templates and to allow automation of emails and email reminders. Notify is a service that's used within central government and is open, and we can connect to using APIs. SingRed is another solution that is out there. So these solutions don't just send email reminders or text messages, they also deal with letters as well. A lot of our page users still deal with letters, which means that any notifications as service provider also needs to have the ability to send letters to those users. The other possible solutions that we're looking at are rules engines. So these are service components that's used, where you can apply some predefined rules to the data to get to a certain outcome or take certain actions. So as an example, if someone buys more than 3 items in a supermarket, then give it a 10% discount on their total cost. So where this is really good, it is when you have a certain set of simple rules in place that are not overly complex and will get to a certain action very quickly. And then we have machine learning and AI. So this solution teaches computers, and the computer basically learns from experience. So as an example, if you present a picture to a child of a cat and told it that it is a cat, then if you keep presenting different pictures to the child of different cats, eventually when they see a cat somewhere else, they'll identify it as a cat. So machine learning basically looks at the data that is provided and learns off that data to provide a specific action or outcome from using that data. This is good to handle any complex rules that might be in place. It's good if you've got large amounts of data. In this case, we've got the data that's held within the case management tool. And you can use it by connecting APIs, or even export the data from the case management tool and feed it the data for it to learn. To go into more detail around machine learning, I'll hand it over to Rupam, who will provide some examples.
Thanks, Pritesh. It's the previous slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So as you may have understood so far, that the problem domain is quite large and the solution domain is also very large. But in the next few slides, I'm just going to focus on the machine learning part of it. As one of my colleagues earlier mentioned, that the human angle can never be taken out. But the thing is that the machine can actually come in as a trusted helper to expedite decision-making process. And machine learning is indeed the solution in that domain. So there are quite a few use case scenarios where machine learning is used. And in case of our problem domain, it's essentially two. What you see in the highlights there, extract and analyze data, which is all about automatically extracting, processing, and analyzing documents to have a better investigation and a faster decision making. And the other is personalized recommendations. These are very high, broad categories of areas where machine learning is used. Next slide, please. Right. So one of the services that you can use is text extraction. And a common pain point that you may have understood so far is processing handwritten documents, transcribing, manually inputting things, even processing the documents that are accompanying a case record or a contact record. And they have to be separately looked at, and there's no easy way to process that information. And this is where text extraction comes to the rescue, because there are highly sophisticated algorithms in the machine learning world, which can not only parse PDFs and images, but they can also parse handwritten documents. And you can use that extracted information to feed into a more comprehensive database, or even use that data to train the machine further downstream. Next slide, please. Right, here you see samples of real documents. Obviously, the personal identifiable information has been taken out. But what you see on the left-hand side is a pre-assessment checklist document. And on the right-hand side, you see a D2A form, which has been filled in, handwritten document by some medical staff. You can see the handwriting there as well. So these two documents have been subjected to the text extraction. And the text extraction nicely spits out this information into a form-based structure, which you can then feed into a database and even use that information to make the machine learn for taking some decisions. Next slide, please. And another service of machine learning is what is called text classification. It's essentially about extracting and analyzing data for accurate investigation. So as you've seen, the common pain point is losing valuable time in signposting, handling cases of housing when they shouldn't be, mental health, drink and drugs. So a lot of time goes in processing things which shouldn't have come in the first instance. And they can be very easily handled by classifying that text and giving them labels so that if such a case arrives, it straight away gets signposted. And the people are spending their valuable time in those cases, which really requires that experience and the manual input. And that's where text classification comes in. And it's all about using data, feed it into the machine, make it pass through an algorithm, and what you get is a trained model that you can use to make more predictions. Next slide, please. So what we are using for the text classification is a supervised learning, where you have, and we have in adult and social care, a huge amount of data that can be labeled. And it produces, you can have binary classifications there. So the outputs could be yes or no, or true or false. And there could be multi-class outcomes as well. So you have multiple labels around what are the possible types of outcomes based on this input data set. So supervised learning, multi-class classification is the technique that can be used to in this particular domain. We've used AWS, it's called Blazing Text. We've performed a proof of concept using this supervised learning. We can use more data sets, even producing binary outcomes like signposting, etc. And we've used AWS SageMaker to carry out this POC in the machine learning world. But there are other service providers as well who provide similar services. I think it's over to you, Pritesh.
Great, thanks, Rupen. Okay, so just going back to the pain points that I discussed earlier. So as you can imagine, there's not one solution that can fix all. It's not like we're replacing the whole entire system, where one system can just come in and can be customizable and everything. So, but we have identified pain points that could address a number of different solutions, which we're looking into. And as you can imagine, there are also some pain points that could be used by just looking at the data and sanitizing that data itself. So, which doesn't really need an expensive technical solution to do that. There is just a pure bit of analysis that can go in and look at the data and update that. And but yeah, there's not one size that can fit all, unfortunately, and a number of different solutions might be employed to address all the various different pain points. So what's next for the team? So the team itself will continue to carry out user research. We're currently in our sprint 4 of a 5-sprint discovery. So the team itself will continue looking at the triage process, so doing a deeper dive to understand what those decisions are. We're also going to do a review of all the care assessment data, see if there's any patterns that can be identified there, and understand what other solutions are out there that could be implemented across the different councils. And then look forward into the alpha phases. Are there any use cases that we can identify that we could explore during our alpha phase? And what's, if any, would our MVP look like for the scope of alpha? So that brings us to the end of our presentation. If you want to get in contact with any of us, our email addresses are provided and here. And if there's any questions, I'll open it up to the floor.
Pritesh, you have, just so you know,
hello.
You have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay. Cool. Rupam, how do you ensure there is no bias programmed into how AI processes information?
So yeah, thanks, Pritesh. So when we are training models, there are certain metrics that you can look at to see how well the trained model is. And at the same time, when you pass in the new information for getting the prediction, you again get some metrics to look at to see how good the prediction is in terms of numbers. So you can assign, it gives you the outcome, but also a metric. And And again, the outcome that is suggested by machine learning is not to be taken blindly. It is a decision support system. It tells you that based on the previous X number of records that have come in, they have resulted into that kind of an outcome. This is what we are proposing. And then the user can essentially click the button to say, yeah, they can review the case, they can review the outcome, and they can proceed with the outcome. So that's how you stop the bias.
Yeah, and Paula has provided a question in terms of have you done any analysis on whether the cost of the solution is provided for the value of money? So we are doing some cost analysis around this and putting a business case together. Obviously, if the costs are exceeds the value, then that wouldn't provide any benefit to the organisation itself. But yes, we are providing some cost analysis around all these solutions. We do have a couple of hands up as well. Jay?
Hello. I'm going to re-ask the question that I asked in the chat, if that's okay, because I see 3 other people have given it a thumbs up, so it might be a productive conversation. So what I said was, on your topic of joining up the things that people have already put a lot of money and investment into. From my experience on other projects like this, Mosaic and the other suppliers, they tend to really dislike sharing access to their APIs. So how can we join things up most effectively when, frankly, those suppliers know that this weakens their business model?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we've been discussing with the suppliers directly. So, as you can imagine, they have a very limited set of APIs that we can hook into, but in terms which won't allow us to connect into the more of the real-time. Being able to change information and being able to access on information in a real-time manner. But with these case management systems, you do have access to the underlying data within the database itself. So therefore, we could extract that data, do some processing on another platform and import the data back. It's not real-time, but you could analyze a lot of data in a short space of time.
Yeah, as in you connect directly to the database and write a bit of software that does like batched data transfers back and forth. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Have you already tested OCR models? Rupam, I don't know if that's a question for yourself.
Is that to do with optical character recognition, if I can clarify? Well, if it is, then yes. Yeah, we have tested it. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully that answers your question, Connie. Oliver.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you so much for a great presentation. Quick question around the sort of demands of the problem segmentation. So like, for example, if a key goal is to achieve quicker and more accurate processes for triaging cases, but it also may well be to reduce the waiting lists or delays around getting people into the system. Have you assessed or have you an estimate for what impact the automation of these processes, triaging processes, might have on sort of waiting lists or delays to getting care?
Yeah, so that is part of the formalization of the business case, which is one of the outputs that we're working to as part of this discovery. We haven't done that analysis just yet, but we're going to be looking at the costs and the stats around the benefits, so it could save on the waiting list and also time for the social workers as well. Cool. Any more questions?
I've got another one if that's all right.
Yeah. Jay, did you want to say a question?
Oh, sure. It was the first question I asked. So I, a few years ago, worked on a project that was solving these, I think, pretty much the same problem, but not with this kind of cross-council partnership model. It was just with Hackney Council. I don't know if any of you were aware of that work and where that ended up, if anywhere, because I moved on before it came to its conclusion.
All I'm aware of is, first of all, do we have anybody from Hackney Council on the call? No. So the latest I've heard is that they were looking at replacing the entire case management system and implementing a totally new case management system themselves. So not going with the likes of Liquid Logic or Mosaic.
That's the work I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they ended up, I don't know what complications happened, but they ended up going with one of the lead case management tools anyway. So I don't know what the details are there.
Okay, a shame, but good to know.
Yeah, okay. I have a question from Dom. Have you involved the individuals being assessed in the research process in their views on using the digital ML AI to replace human interactions? So we do have catch-ups with obviously the teams that are doing the day-to-day work in terms of the social workers, the locality teams, the access teams. Sue will probably add on to this. They are very wary that you need a human to decide care and provide care planning. So we're not looking to replace humans. We're basically reducing their processing time, reducing their manual time that they currently do within that process. I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that, Sue.
Yeah, just to agree with that, really. Before we started this project, we did a big discovery and alpha around our front door, and we spoke to, a lot of users, service users at that point, and people who were about to use the service, the people who, their parents had recently had a diagnosis of dementia or were just trying to find out information. And something that did come out really clearly about that is that we're never going to stop people wanting to talk to us. They want a conversation. That human interaction is really, really important. So this project, taking that evidence, has very much has been about improving how we manage the internal processes. Really, actually, it's about freeing up more time to have that human interaction, to actually get a better level of service for the people. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be front door tools that will help with that, and we're looking at some front door tools that will help with that. For example, a sort of interactive signposting system, but that doesn't mean that human conversation won't happen.
Cool. Thanks, Sue. So a question from
Merlins. Oh, somebody's brought on Merlins.
So Daniel asked, are these slides going to be sent out? Yes, so I'll be working with Lottie to send out the slides. And I think they'll also be held on the Lottie slides as well, and Eventbrite as well. Yeah, I'll bump the slides back. Joe asked, are there any open case management systems that you know of? The short answer to that is no, there isn't. They're pretty much the big players have taken the market, and it's very hard for those teams in adult social care to actually change to another type of system. Because whether it's based on familiarity or it's basically a well-known product that they've adopted within their workplace.
Can I just pick up on the Merlins?
Yeah.
Because you know what a little pet topic of mine they are. We have heard from every council how problematic these referrals are. And there definitely is a need, and we can't look at it as part of this project, and it's not going to be like next week. But I would love to get a kind of cross-council working body together to do some proper evidence-based why these are not working, so that we can work with the Met Police to make it better. But that's something we need to do together, because everyone's having the same problems.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Jay. I'll have a look at that. Get you sent through. Yeah, that seems to be all the questions. Genta, did you want to say anything to finish off?
None other than to say thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. It was great to have those questions, and we need this kind of challenge and feedback for for projects of this type. And then thank you to all of the Kingston team for not only for the great job you're doing, but also for presenting today. And yes, I'll be sharing slides and the recording of the session as well via Eventbrite. So thank you and have a good rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.